Welcome to another session of Learner's Mindset Discussion. I'm Dr. Dwayne Hrapnick, and my wonderful colleague here is
Dr. Talissa Thibodeau.
Well, it's been a couple weeks since we've had an opportunity to get together and talk about these things. Start of a new term, you're on a course release. Life happens. Life happens. So, but we're back. We're back, and we're exploring some interesting ideas. Today, I think we need to get into the notion of what is the learner's mindset. So our vlogs here and our podcasts are under the subject of the learner's mindset discussion. But what the heck is a learner's mindset? What are your initial thoughts on that? And then I'll jump in and we'll go back and forth like usual.
When I think about a learner's mindset initially, I couldn't help but go back to some of the ideas that came about from Sir Ken Robinson and some of those folks. I think about a learner's mindset just on a very simplistic term is always being willing and able to change and improve. And I think what his quote, if you're not prepared to be wrong, you'll never come up with anything original. Sometimes I think of a learner's mindset as a way of just constant changing and improving to get where you want to be, to go down the path you want to go on. And so when I think of it very simply, that's what comes to mind. And when I go back to our digital learning and leading program, and I think about some of our entry-level folks that come in at 5302, it's really important that they think of themselves as having a learner's mindset from the very get-go, so that they can allow themselves to sort of change and improve as they go throughout the program. But really, it's an attitude towards life, too. Anything that you want to change and improve towards, you want to have that learner's mindset. No matter if you want to be really good at drawing, art, if you want to graduate from a graduate program, it's just important to have that sort of that mindset that encompasses change and be willing to try new things and take risks. Does that make sense?
Yep, it sure does. Try new things, take risk, that sense of curiosity. I would argue inquisitiveness, the what does this button do approach. I've been exploring this for a lot of years. I agree. It's that natural curiosity that we see in young children. I would suggest, and I'm not alone in this, if you take a look at the author of The More Beautiful Question, and if you take a look at some of the work of Piaget and Dewey and others, they would argue that children have this natural tendency to explore. I've heard one author, and I can't remember his name right now, who said that a young child is a natural engineer. They'll grab something, right? As an engineer, they grab it, they look at it, they try to break it, they even taste it, they smell it, right? That's what an engineer does, right? They look at the different things, and they want to understand how does it work. And so young children do that naturally. And again, you're a little bit closer to the young children's stage than I am, and you happen to have a couple of them, so you know exactly what that means. They're putting everything in their mouth, they're checking everything out, right? And it doesn't, even when they get older, they're still doing that those foolish things, testing out the world that we see them as foolish or dangerous or unusual things, but it's just the way that you find out how does the world work around you. And I think it's a very natural thing. And so as we look at the literature that's out there, it's very evident that learning is something that is intrinsic to the human being, right? It's something that we do. But it's something that we tend to lose. I think it's something that we tend to lose. And I'm going to go a step further here now, in the sense that, and I'm using some of the ideas from The More Beautiful Question, by age of 5, children start to lose or children peak in their questioning. The research in the book identifies that children ask over 500 questions a day. But as soon as they go into school, and by the time they start to get into high school, grade 9 or so, junior or freshman, numbers of questions go down from that 500 down to the 20s, and then by the end of high school, you're in the single digits.
Yeah.
And if you think about that, they're not asking questions. We've conditioned our learners to stop asking questions. We've conditioned them to stop exploring. That's scary. Now, what do we do? What do we do in our program, the DLL program? Well, we point out the work of Carol Dweck. the growth mindset. You know what? Since a lot of people have lost that natural inquisivistic nature, we need to encourage them to restore it through taking a look at Carol Druck's work, the growth mindset, right? This notion that we have the ability to grow and to enrich ourselves, we have to revive that idea in our learners because
Yep.
we've quenched it, right? The Innovators Mindset, wonderful book. George Cours's book, absolutely wonderful. You know, we need to actually encourage people to explore, to experiment, to test things out because they've lost that. I believe that instead of just focusing on the growth mindset, the innovators mindset, and rebuilding this natural curiosity, do you think it'd be better if we stopped quenching it? Maybe if we stopped quenching that natural curiosity at the young age and helped to facilitate the continuing of asking of questions, that the learner's mindset that children have, those natural born engineers, those natural, you know, inquisitors, that sense of exploration, if we stopped quenching it, well, then it would continue. That's kind of my thought with the learner's mindset. What do you think?
Yeah, going back to the early part of your discussion here, I was thinking about my son, Micah. He's 3, and he does break everything he touches. I said it yesterday. I said, Micah, why do you break everything you touch? And I followed it up with, he has to pick something up, turn it, spin it, push it, figure it out. What does this thing do in his head? He doesn't know what it is, but what does this thing do? And I thought to myself, I would, instead of saying stop doing that, because that's where the quenching would start, what if we're squandering an opportunity? And we have to remember that, when these kids go to school, what happens sometimes is they become programmed. They become programmed to think and believe a certain thing, we learn the content and they don't know how to apply it. They have to learn real world situations where they are given those opportunities for choice and voice, but to be able to change and adapt and mold and to find their way, to find their path. And something I think about when you talk about Carol Dweck is, in 5302, in the first course in the DLL program, I often ask the students and say, I want you to think about yourself, invest in yourself. Do you believe that your skills can be cultivated? Do you believe that they're concrete? So ask yourself, read the first 4 chapters and then the next 4 chapters, and then ask yourself that question again. Cultivate versus concrete. What do you believe about yourself? What do you believe? And I think that's where the mindset starts to shift. And if we can get our learners to, ask themselves those questions, if I can get my 3-year-old son, maybe on a more simplistic term, go into school with that thinking, then maybe we won't be squandering that opportunity or quenching that. If I can then, help him sort of develop that mindset at an early age. So, and that's what we do in the DLL program. You and I are big fans of walking the walk, and then you went on to talk a bit about your sons, and doing these, you didn't say it, but these dangerous sports, and what will I do if I just tweak this a little bit or turn, the bike that way a little bit? I think about all of the stories you've shared about their Enduro World Series bike racing and what they do. And I just think, wow, if I can get, my mind says to me, if I can get this little boy, this 3-year-old boy, to continue asking and thinking these things and then become a 22-year-old bike racer, or however old they are, 19 and 22, 21, that maybe I can then allow him to be that engineer that he wants to be, or whoever he wants to be, without squashing that. That I think is where the learner's mindset is born, cultivated, and they take that with them and they can become who they want to be. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, as soon as you're talking about your son Micah and him having to test everything and just press on this and turn this over and break it, right? Break it. Why? Well, you know what? That's just the way that we explore the world. We push it to the limits. We find out what's going on. Now, the exciting thing about facilitating the learner's mindset, and I have to be open here, I have been experimenting on my kids as they've been growing up. I've let them break things. Now, the exciting thing is, as they get older, guess what? They figured out how to put it back together.
Mhm.
So the breaking is part of the process of testing the limits, testing the boundaries, seeing what can be done, taking something, adapting it to different purposes, and then the ability to take and put things back together again. Or the other interesting thing is that once we facilitate, or if we don't quench that learner's mindset, and we help to develop that learner's mindset, then you start to look at the world around you as a world of opportunity. Uh,
Canvas.
it's a canvas, not just a canvas, but Gardner Campbell makes the argument that there's gold everywhere, right? We have golden opportunities everywhere, and there's just gold at every turn. We've got gold that is available to us, and it's just a matter of refining it and turning it into something valuable. So when I see that learner's mindset grow, it's not uncommon for my boys and I to go to the hardware store and walk up and down the aisles with a couple of parts in our hand and looking at different ideas and looking for different components that we can use to solve a particular problem that we're working on. Right? So that learner's mindset really changes the way that you look at the world. And to give you an example of what happens in it with an adult or a young man, okay, my boys have grown up with that idea of learner's mindset, and there is this attitude that, well, we can learn anything, we can fix anything, we can do anything. It's great. No, there's some trade-offs. There's some negative things. A few years back, I might have mentioned this story to you. My older son is into older trucks. He likes old Chevy trucks. And we were looking at an old 4x4, a true 4x4 truck that was a rust bucket. We live here in Canada, North Vancouver, a lot of rain, and we're coast to the coast, salty conditions, vehicles rust. And this vehicle we looked at was just rusted everywhere. And my son was not deterred at all by the fact that it was rusted. And all the while we're looking at it, he spent a lot of time going over every inch of the vehicle. On the way home, he's saying, well, Dad, yeah, I think we should get it. I said, Levi, that truck is rusted. You're going to have to replace everything. He said, Dad, well, it's a wonderful opportunity. Let's buy a welder. I want to learn how to weld anyways. I'll buy a welder, and this will be a wonderful opportunity for me to take things apart and to fix it. Dad, it's just welding. How hard could that be? There's a bit of work involved. We had conversations back and forth, and he recognized that might be a little bit too big of a project to take on to learn how to weld. But at the same time, you need to recognize there that if you have that attitude, how hard
Right.
can that be?
Right.
Well, then that means you're not afraid to try. You're not afraid to experiment. And so, in that essence, how hard can that be? That's the same as mica pressing those things and biting those things and breaking those things. So, I think what I've seen in my boys as they've grown up is that they've maintained that learner's mindset.
Yeah.
And they approach the world from that perspective. How hard can that be? Other people are doing that. I can do that too. It's really just a matter of applying myself. And so I'm seeing that in the businesses that they're involved in and the way that they, pursue different endeavors. And so that learner's mindset, I think, is so wonderful. And the exciting part about that is we can quench it a little bit in school, but I don't think it ever really goes away. I really don't. And if you think about it, how much work do we really spend when we work with the students in 5302 to get them to sort of re-energize or reinvigorate that growth mindset? They read the book, they have a few discussions. It doesn't take that long for them to recognize, wow, I can do this. I really can do this. And you start to see that attitude come out in the discussions. And the other part of that attitude is, I'm not really sure how I'm going to do this, but I know I can do this.
Yeah.
And so I think it doesn't take much to reinvigorate that growth mindset for some people.
Yeah. I think about, you know, the new culture of learning and how it's easy to lose sight of play, creativity, imagination, everything that the new culture of learning talks about. if you're so focused on one thing, and that's just, getting the grade and getting a good grade and focused on the content. But one thing I've always lived by, and I didn't even realize I had my own learner's mindset, it was back in my early 20s. This is when I think of failing forward and all of that, I start thinking about, I lost my dad when I was 21, kind of unexpected, right? And from that point, I learned how to turn every challenge into an opportunity to grow. And what I learned recently, and this is a decade later, maybe longer, 15, 16 years, almost 2 decades later. And it reminds me when you talked about Gardner Campbell and his concept behind making things golden. So don't just, turn opportunities into, challenges into opportunities, but turn them into golden opportunities. And I think about when you get in that mindset early on, this is that outlet that you can then experience the new culture of learning, or experience being creative, having fun, and not losing that sense of what excites you. So it just depends, how. And here's another question: how do you move your mindset? So let's say you don't have that mindset. How do you move your mindset into that? Sometimes, it takes something different for everyone. For me, it took a big event to occur, and then everything changed for me. For other folks, I've noticed in the DLL program, as soon as they're given an opportunity to kind of veer away from some of the schooled stuff that they have to go through and pushing curriculum and content and whatnot, I know because I've been a teacher, but to have the creative canvas that they can then go out and develop an innovation plan that excites them, that will excite their students. That's where sometimes learner's mindset is born, if it doesn't happen before then. So, how do we get our folks to, and how do people in life get to this point where they can develop this learner's mindset? What do you think?
Well, I think that we live, again, you know what I'm going to say. We live in the most amazing time to be a learner. We really do. And I, maybe I've read too much of Peter Diamandis's work, is his notion of abundance, right? There's so many opportunities. And I think the human being, the human entity, what we are, we're a learning machine. And it really takes a lot to quench that. And it really doesn't take that much to ignite that spark again, that desire to learn, and to really go for it and to explore. And I think what helps to ignite that and to really energize people is that if you connect an authentic real world opportunity, something real, something genuine, an opportunity to make a difference, right? If you bring out a purpose, a genuine purpose, and we've seen that with the DLL students. I've seen that in the lives of my boys. I've seen that in the lives of many of my students over the years, that if you give the learner the opportunity to make a difference, to be part of something bigger, to actually impact, to improve the world around them, the work that they do changes, because it's no longer just about getting that grade. It's no longer about them. It's about making a difference in other people's lives. So when we work with teachers and they implement a e-portfolio, a blended learning strategy, a one-to-one, a makerspace, they see the epiphany moments with their students, right? When those eyes light up and when these kids start to recognize, wow, I can really do that. I can really do that. Once you see that, once they experience that, it's almost impossible to turn it off. And so, you say, how do we really reignite the learner's mindset? Well, I think it's always there, but I think we've got to create and foster the right type of an environment where we can nurture that learner to come back to and sort of re-energize and reignite that learner's mindset. And we do that through giving them choice, ownership, and voice through those authentic learning opportunities, right? It's that simple change of focus. So instead of looking at the skill and the knowledge, no, you look up, you look down the road a little bit, you look to the project, you look to the fact that, well, you know what, these maker spaces that we're going to be implementing in the library, or these maker spaces we're going to be implementing in the school, are going to give some kids an opportunity to actually build something real, whether it's a robot or it's a solution to a problem, or if it's simply to construct something that they've never done before. It can change lives. It can let kids know that they can actually do something significant and meaningful more than just regurgitate information on an exam. So, having the ability to create these environments, when our students do that, they see that the real world opportunities that they have been given, and they pass it forward. It's a wonderful opportunity, but it takes a little while, because a lot of our students, especially our better students, our A students, they know the system works, and the system is really about just giving the instructor what they want. And so I think re-energizing, reinvigorating that learner's mindset is really a matter of getting back to helping students to learn, to engage in the real world. And again, goes back to Dewey, goes back to Piaget's work. We know that the concrete real world that the learner engages in is the starting point for making connections to the abstract world, right? You need that real world connection in order to be able to work abstractly. So, I think we've done a disservice to a lot of our learners by moving them away from the concrete, tactile, real experience of making a difference. So again, that's the way that we've been doing it, and it's working. But there's trade-offs. There are trade-offs, unfortunately. Before we talk about the trade-offs, any other thoughts you want to add to that?
The only thing I think, as you were talking about this, that came to my mind was the emotional connection that learners have when they're working on something bigger than them. The ownership that they take when it's important to them and it's one of their goals. I think when I look back at my years, there's not a thing that I could have taught. I could have stood up in front of the classroom and just taught, but that doesn't mean it's important to the learners. They have to find a connection to that. And whether we bridge that connection or help out with that connection, that's so important because these kids I think we all in a way want to have, like, go back to our childhood loves and the things that really spiked us and turned us on to learning new things and going back to Micah and breaking everything. Who doesn't want to go back in their mind and revisit the things they love the most? I mean, so I think it's so important that we focus on authentic learning opportunities, that our kids, our learners, it doesn't matter if they're kindergarten all the way to high school, college students, get that opportunity for choice and voice. They need to take that emotional roller coaster through what they're learning and attach to what they're doing and take ownership of it, because that is ultimately going to lead them down the path of meeting their goals. So let's talk about the trade-offs.
Well, the trade-offs, and this notion of trade-offs, again, in my watching videos and reading this weekend, I can't remember who the author was. I'm going to have to look this up, but he was talking about the fact, she was talking about the fact that in education, we have to be careful when we talk about solving problems. Our learning environments are complex environments, and our educational system is quite sophisticated, quite elaborate. And I don't think you can solve a problem in education. I don't think education is broken. I think we can make adjustments, we can improve things, and by focusing on authentic learning, there are trade-offs. So what are the trade-offs? Well, the biggest thing that I see that we're trading off is control, right? So when you shift the focus of the learning from your responsibility as the educator, as a teacher, through direct instruction, through lecturing, through whatever it is that you're doing, and you ask the learner to get engaged, to identify something that they want to work on, you come alongside them as a coach or a mentor. To do that, the trade-off is you've got to give them some control. And you also have to, another trade-off, which is sort of related to the control issue, when you start to give the learner control, the issue is they might go down some paths where you're not an expert. You might not know how to help them exactly. And then you have to put on your learner's hat and come alongside them as that, as that learner, and do things in a different way. So the other trade-off is comfort, right? Lack of control, comfort. And then it could go in directions that you're not completely sure of. And you then are tasked as a coach and a mentor to see the connections that are being made and to sort of bring in that direction that you have based on the curriculum, based on the age level that they're at, based on where you need to go in terms of the work that they're doing. So you are then tasked with finding those connections and helping them to see those connections. So there's a certain level of uncertainty that authentic learning brings about. That's one of the first trade-offs. How about yourself? What trade-offs do you see?
Well, I think that a teacher specifically might be thinking, how do I fit these types of opportunities into my day? Guess what? It's not something that you can absolutely plan on. These are opportunities that the kids might go down, and they might come to you and ask some questions, and you can help them seek the answers to those questions if they go over to a computer and do their own search, or however that may be. This isn't like something you have to block out a certain amount of time of the day. This is devoted just to this. These opportunities come up. It's how you manage these flexibly, that these students can have these opportunities to go and look some things up. Maybe they're hungry for a project and they want to do more, or they want to do some research outside of the class, or they finish things up. These are not necessarily things you have to plan for. I'm sitting here thinking about how many things come up in our day as a classroom teacher, how many meetings, how many phone calls we have to make back to parents. We have a meeting after school. We don't have time to plan these things. Let the kids look some of these things up. Let them have a little bit of control as an extension activity to what they're doing. It doesn't have to be blocked out time. So I can see where that question would come up as a classroom teacher. But one of the things I think is really exciting is some of the more, test-taking skills and things that I used to have to help the kids do whenever I was in the classroom. I'd always bridge an extension, an authentic learning opportunity extension from out of those, and these kids would then ignite their passion based on whatever that authentic learning opportunity was. So we were reading a story about bridges. We busted out the marshmallows and the pretzels, and they built bridges. So that to me, and that might ignite an engineering passion, and then from there, they might actually ask questions and lead the entire class into a conversation. It's really about, the art of teaching and helping them make some connections and letting them make the connections as well. You don't have to do all the work. So you might think, I can't do these things that Dr. H and Dr. Thibodeau were talking about. Guess what? Your learners will do them for you if you kind of guide, facilitate, mentor them along the side. So that they'll, and it's not for you, it's for them. Does that make sense?
Oh, it does. It does.
Yeah.
So another trade-off that we see here, and when I say trade-off, or it might be better to voice it in terms of a challenge, is that when you're doing these things that happen and you take advantage of these learning opportunities, these learning moments, some of the challenges are they don't often fit into the block of the day, right? So this scheduled block of each of the day. So you've got time issues, like the whole notion of 20% time or genius hour. Well, stuffing creative discovery-based learning into 50 minutes or an hour, you might get it started, but it might spill over. And so one of the trade-offs or challenges there is that it doesn't always fit neatly into this butts in seat blocks that we like to be comfortable with. And so measurement of these activities is difficult. And because we base a lot of what we do in education on standards and standardization on the average learner in terms of where they're at, average area in science, because we still do that, not still, we do that predominantly, it's difficult dealing with some of the pressures that you have as a system, right? So when a student creates something, they build something, they innovate, they come up with an amazing infographic or create a video to explain a particular situation or problem. You see the product, you see the end result. Well, how do you standardize that? Right, and you know that the end result that they built is going to satisfy a need, and people can actually use it. For example, if we think of one of our students in New Jersey, some of their grade 3 students were building that component for the wheelchair, right, to prevent it from tipping. Right now, what's the standard there? Well, did it work? Did the prototype work? Well, whether or not it worked by whether or not it prevented the wheelchair from tipping over. So you can see that there is a standard in terms of did it work or not, but it's not, that can't be standardized. So that's a challenge. We have to move away from the fact that not everything can fit into that standardized package. And so rather than throw out the standard testing, although some people would like to do that, you can still have it. But as we've talked before, you turn that into a small percentage of the time. That becomes a 20% time. You spend 15-20% of your time on that standardized testing to satisfy the governmental requirements. And then the rest of the time you can spend on these amazing activities
Yeah.
that lead to, exploration, creativity, critical and analytical thinking, problem solving, all these wonderful things that we need as our kids go on to their lives in the 21st century. Because remember, the learner's mindset, I think, is going to prepare the learner for life.
Yeah.
And we need to do everything we can to help prepare them for life, not just for the test. So I think the learner's mindset is a wonderful way to do that. The trade-offs are, we've got systems of education, and I think what ends up happening is that we get caught up. Oh, we've got to focus on the test. So we spend all of our time preparing. Well, you know what? Research is pretty clear. There's strategies, there's testing strategies, there's preparation strategies. We can spend that smaller amount of time and still prepare them for the test, and spend the majority of time preparing them for life.
Yep.
That's a good trade-off.
Yeah. And I think when you take that test prep and you put it within that 20%, if you spend 80% of your time working on things that are authentic related, they'll be using those skills that they're trying to learn over here for test prep. They'll actually be applying those skills. But see, sometimes our system's just the opposite, right? We're spending 80% learning and memorization and recitation of facts and things that we might be using 20% of our time applying it. So then where's the good in that? So if we kind of invert the two, I think that might actually prepare them for life, like you're talking about. And don't we want to prepare our learners for life and not the test?
We do. There's one more issue, and I'm going to share what we went through just before we started this recording today. Mm-hmm. The other issue is time. This type of learning takes time. And if you live the learner's mindset, what does that mean? You're going to explore, you're going to experiment. If somebody says, hey, did you hear about this particular product? Now you can do these things. Mm-hmm. We spent almost 45 minutes experimenting with Skype here before we went back to this particular tool, right? Think about it, 45 minutes. The learner's mindset puts you in a position where you are going to try, experiment, and explore. And after our 45 minutes, we realized the particular version of Skype for Business didn't give us the flexibility that we needed. Yeah. So that's one of the challenges. This type of learning takes time, and we live in a world where we aren't willing to give up that time. Right? That's what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think about how we spent that time and came back to this, but you know what we did? We learned what kinds of things we need to look for, and that to me is an opportunity to turn a challenge into an opportunity itself. So then, we keep exploring different options. We don't stop there. We just keep exploring different options as they come up until we find one that works the best. And right now, this platform works the best. So that's what you got to do. You got to test and try it and have fun with it, and then go back. And it kind of reminds me of the Eduardo Braceno video, and talk a bit about finding where your box is and getting outside of it and coming back in for the tools you need and getting back out. I think that's all part of learning. I mean, if you want somebody to hand you what to do and tell you what to do, I mean, I don't know how much learning you're really going to do if all you have to do is just spew it back out. So test, try, be okay with failing forward, listen to positive, critique, those types of things. Have, adopt a bit of a growth mindset and thinking that you can cultivate your skills. I know I didn't wake up one day and just decide I wanted to be a graduate school professor. No, I had to cultivate my skills to get here. If I would have thought at 5 years old, that's where I was going to be. Okay. But, you've got to grow in everything that you do. And I think when you adopt that mindset, it's like, I can't go back to a stagnant mindset after that. I don't,
Yeah, it never goes away. I've got a little bit of gray hair here, so I've been doing this for a while, and I am probably even more curious now than I was as a kid. And the reason is that I see the potential. Mm-hmm. I see the potential. I see the opportunity. And so when we heard about, when our colleague was saying, well, you can do this and this and this in Skype, because one of the challenges we have is we've got these black bars above our recordings. We need to eliminate those. We've been experimenting with different things, and we both read up the reviews of Skype for Business. Oh, it allows you this functionality. Well, guess what? The free version of Skype for Business doesn't give you all that functionality. But we saw the opportunity. We saw the opportunity, so we're willing to go after it and try and experiment. And how many times we rebooted the computer, install this, try this. It didn't stop, and that can be frustrating. It was. It's a little bit of annoying, but at the same time, well, that's just the way that we work.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason it is the way that we work is that there are so many opportunities out there. If you don't experiment, if you don't try, if you don't explore, if you don't go, what does this button do? You won't find out. And I think we owe it to our learners to encourage them to not lose that desire. Going back to how we started, I think, you talked about Micah, your 3-year-old son. He does that. He explores everything. And so I think what we owe it to your son and your daughter and to a whole bunch of kids that are out there is to create that environment where they can continue to explore. Now, we don't want them chewing and biting on stuff when as they get older. Well, maybe. I was watching a car show last night, and the guy was tasting the oil to see what it was like. Maybe that'll never change. But my point is that we've got to create this environment that kids are encouraged to explore, to keep on trying, to find out how things work. And you know what? If we do that, they are going to come up with solutions to problems that we haven't been able to resolve. They're going to improve our world and make it an even more amazing and even better place. And I think we owe it to our kids, and we owe it to the world to create that type of environment where that happens.
Yep.
And we can do it. We live in the most amazing time. All the resources are available to us. Yeah, learner's mindset, so important. So important.
I agree. Well, I don't have anything additional that I can think of at this very minute.
Well, we're going to put out a plug for a new book that we're working on. We are actually we've got some ideas and outline going for a book on the learner's mindset. This is something that's been close to my heart for many, many years. Yeah, it's been just a pleasure talking about this. As we've talked about this, I think we need to go down that path even more so. So as we build out our outline, we're going to let our listeners and readers know how far along we are with a new book, The Learner's Mindset.
All right.
Take care, everyone.